What's up, my dear humans? Welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Yesterday, which was Wednesday, September 4th. Those of you who are fans of Curt Jaimungal, which I am, his podcast, Theories of Everything, is one of my favorites because he has a background on physics and mathematics, and he invites some of the brightest minds in the world. He's had interviews with people like Noam Chomsky, Bernardo Kastrup, and he's had a few interviews with Lue Elizondo. A few months ago, he teased Lue Elizondo as if he was kind of like a Pokemon, which was kind of funny to me. And I did throw in a joke there that maybe Lue, what kind of Pokemon was he? Or if Curt had like a Master Ball to catch that Pokemon. That's just me when I was a teenager because I love Pokemon. So, but he finally dropped the interview on Wednesday, and they talked about many different aspects of his book and his experiences. And contrary to what others think or say, I believe that Curt is the one who has asked the most niche questions for Lue. Because you can tell Lue takes a little time to answer because it's not easy questions to answer. So kudos to Curt for doing that. I think it was pretty awesome. But I do want to talk about two specific things from that interview. It's just like 5 minutes of Curt's content. Please, Curt, don't copyright strike me. I really love your content, and I hope you understand that. I am going to use these clips because I think they're very important to parts of the content that I create. One of them is the fact, and I think this is one of the most important parts of the interview, where Lue mentions how much progress there has been within the halls of the Pentagon and amongst people from the military and the intelligence community to openly talk about UAP or UFOs. They say UAP because they feel safer saying it, and now they can openly talk about it without getting a psych evaluation. That's what used to happen before, and I think the fact that it no longer happens speaks volumes of how much progress there has been on the topic within the military and the government. And I think that's highly, highly commendable because in just 7 years, this change is very evident now. And that's because of people like Lue and people like David Grush and David Fravor and Ryan Graves, Tim Gallaudet. All of them have contributed to this. So thank you guys. You will never be forgotten for this. I want to play that clip right now.
I think the vast majority in the government did not want me having this conversation. I think a lot of that has changed, partly because of people like you and mainstream media and people like Chris, who've got people in Congress involved, where it's now a little easier to have this conversation. You don't have to whisper the word UFO in the halls of the Pentagon. You can now just talk about UAP in the Pentagon freely without worrying about losing your security clearance or having a forced psychological evaluation. So I think it's getting easier. I have a lot of support when I go to the Pentagon now. People before who would never even want to look at me, wouldn't want to associate with me. People are coming up and shaking my hand in some cases and saying, "Hey, thank you for having this conversation. It's very important." It's important that we remove the stigma and taboo. So I do see there are other elements that are becoming increasingly forthcoming with their interest in this topic within the U.S. government. So I think the tide is changing.
Yeah, so the other clip is more interesting to me and to the content that I create specifically because I've been realizing that Lue has gone on some of the podcasts and some of the mainstream interviews and mentioned this threat narrative that I frankly do not agree with, but this explanation from Lue does give me more clarity on what he means. And I think I can understand now why Lue potentially sees this phenomenon as a threat. Here's another clip.
So let's assume that they have been here for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. Why all of a sudden is it a matter of national security?
Well, it might not be, depending what hat you wear, right? So right now, let's say I'm wearing a hat for my national security. So Kurt, I'm going to go over for your new listeners here, an analogy I like to use a lot. Now, I know you've heard it before, but just bear with me for a second while we go through it.
Sure.
So, Kurt, you live in Toronto, and I'm sure you live in a wonderfully safe neighborhood. Do you lock the front door when you go to bed at night?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I don't expect anything bad to happen, but just a matter of good measure, I'll lock the front door. And some days I might even go a step further and I'll just make sure the windows are locked and turn on the alarm system before I go to bed. Let's say one Sunday morning you wake up, come downstairs to have a nice hot cup of coffee or tea. And as you come downstairs, you see size 11 muddy boot prints on your living room carpet. Now, nothing's been taken, nothing's out of place, no one's been hurt. But despite you locking the doors the night before and the windows and turning on the alarm, there are now muddy boot prints in your living room carpet that were not there the night before. My question to you is that a threat? And my response to that is, well, it could be if it wanted to be, so we should probably figure out how it's getting into the house. It's the same analogy with this conversation. If you have something that can come into controlled U.S. airspace and over sensitive military installations and interfere with our nuclear capabilities and is interested in our military equities, wearing my national security hat, I have to say, even if there's only a 5%, hell, even if there's only a 1% chance this thing could be here for bad reasons, that's 1% chance I can't afford to take. So it is my job. In fact, it is my responsibility to investigate this to make sure it is not a threat. Now, what is a threat? Well, from a national security perspective, the calculus is super simple. It's capabilities versus intent. Well, we've seen some of the capabilities. We have no idea the intent. So we don't know if these things are a threat. We do know that they're interested in our nuclear equities. Now, taking off my national security hat and putting on my Lue Elizondo hat, no, I'm not sure there is enough information to suggest that these things are a real threat. Now, when you talk to people in what they call the experiencer community, some who have claimed they've been quote unquote abducted, well, now I got to put my national security hat back on, because as a former special agent and a special agent in charge, if you told me that you've been taken somewhere against your will, well, guess what? That's kidnapping. Okay, that's a felony offense. And by the way, God forbid you were touched, without your permission. Well, that's assault. Okay, so we can start racking up the felony charges here, right? That's not a good thing. So to go back to your question, is this a threat or is it not a threat? The fact that we don't know, that means we need to find out. And in order to find out, we have to treat it as a potential threat until we know that it's not, if that makes sense.
If they have been around for tens of thousands of years, maybe even longer, why doesn't that factor into their safety? So, for instance, Richard Dawkins is known for the parasite theory of religion, that it's a mind virus, but he becomes more and more incorrect the longer timescale that a particular religion has been around, because if it's been around for millennia, then there's something mutual about it. If there's a virus and it kills your host, it's not good for the virus. So if these beings, or whatever powers these crafts or whatever is behind them, if they've been here longer than predates the written word, like let's say longer than 4000 BCE, then why can't a similar argument of symbiosis be made?
It can be made. No, it can be. This could be a symbiotic relationship, or it could be a non-parasitic relationship. It doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship. It could be, look, we fly over the Serengeti all the time in a helicopter, and we track our herd of wildebeest. We dart one. And once it's tranquilized, we take some blood and we test its O2 levels and its migration patterns. And then what do? We get back on the helicopter, fly away. The wildebeest wakes up and, wanders over to the watering hole, right? And goes to his friend and says, Bill, you're not going to believe this, man. I was there, and all of a sudden the thing came down in the sky, and I'm lying down. People are touching me, and I wake up, and now my butt hurts, right? So, I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but in reality, we don't really talk to the wildebeest. We don't negotiate with the wildebeest, because the wildebeest doesn't have the capacity to really understand what we're trying to achieve. Could this be the same thing? Sure, absolutely. Absolutely, it could be. And so, this is why this is part of my argument, Curt, when it comes to this conversation. I don't want my government, as much of a patriot and loyalist I am, I don't want my government, from a national security perspective, involved in certain aspects of this conversation. Because this conversation involves us not just from a national security perspective, but it involves us from a psychological perspective, a philosophical perspective, a theological perspective, a sociological perspective that, frankly, I don't want some three-star general telling me how I should feel about this. Maybe this is a conversation for your priest or your rabbi or your imam, or maybe your friends around the dinner table. Maybe this is a conversation to have with academics and scientists. And so from that perspective, this is why people like you are so valuable in this space, because you can open up the aperture, right? And now you're bringing this conversation to the street. You're bringing this conversation to the people, which ultimately is where this conversation belongs.
Yeah, so that makes sense, because if we are a less technologized and less evolved species from this phenomenon or these entities, that means that we really don't have any power over them. So we don't really have a say, but we can take precautions, which is, I think, what Lue is trying to say here. And I do agree with that. There is something that I do have to push back on a little bit, which is the woo stuff, or quote unquote woo. I don't like that word. Why woo? Like, this should be part of human development. The remote viewing and the capacities that our minds have, these discoveries that are happening as we speak, and what Dr. Jacobo Grinberg studied for decades in the brain of shamans. This is something that, based on what Dr. Garry Nolan discovered, it is something that can potentially happen to every one of us. This more developed tissue inside the brain where the caudate putamen is, and the caudate nucleus. And I think that this is the precursor to us finding out that we're eventually going to use our brains differently than we do now. Because the brain, and I know Tom DeLonge has talked about this before, Grinberg talked about it constantly, Itzhak Bentov talked about it too. Our brains are some kind of machine to create stuff and to manipulate the environment around us. And this is something that we still are like in the infancy stages of, but we are finally getting to know a little bit about it. I did a video yesterday of Don Rodolfo and Chris Bledsoe, people who are not even from the same era. And Don Rodolfo displayed healing abilities, for which he became really famous, and people loved him for that, because he saved lives, and he did it with this quote unquote power. Chris Bledsoe has contact with the phenomenon, and he does also have some accounts where he has helped heal people. And it is not just healing. There are reports of different types of psi abilities, psionics, as Ross says, that I think we all have within us. And that I think there are ways of awakening these abilities and use them for the benefit of mankind. The problem is that I think, and this is my interpretation of things, I think that the government has hidden this for centuries. Not the government exactly, but the powers that be, because governments change through time. They've been around for generations. They are the powers that be. These power structures have suppressed a lot of this information for a long time, because you can only imagine if we discovered that we do have some kind of skill that can circumvent whatever power structure these guys are putting us through. And for example, we won't longer have to pay for medicine, or we won't longer have to pay for transport, or that is something that, according to the powers that be, cannot happen because they will lose control. On the other hand, and to play devil's advocate for a little bit, Imagine that we discovered that we do have these abilities and we suddenly could have the power to just, with our own thought, just kill someone or commit crimes or steal stuff, or, I can see why this information could be suppressed and prevent us from understanding these abilities. And I think that there should be or must be a way, like a gray area, where we can address this and understand ourselves a little better. And Lue Elizondo and all the people involved in this are not really talking about it. When Lue was asked about remote viewing, if he was still doing it by himself, he was very vague. He said yes, but he didn't want to go into detail. Did you catch that? I think that's one of the reasons, because it is a sensitive topic for the powers that be, but it shouldn't be a sensitive topic at all. We need to understand that as humanity keeps going and advancing towards the event horizon, or what people call the singularity, there will come a time when all of this information will no longer be suppressed from us. It will be right in front of us. And we will have to make a choice of how to use it and how to be responsible with it. To quote one of my favorite comic books of all time, with great power comes great responsibility. That's what I think that we need to come to terms with. Maybe I'm an optimist, I don't know, but I do believe that the wide majority of humanity will use this power responsibly. Lue is right. There is still a lot of evil in this world, and you cannot negotiate with evil. And I do also think that if we are dealing with multiple phenomena or multiple entities or multiple groups of NHI, not all of them are good. And we also have to learn how to deal with that. But the fact that this information about our own skills has been suppressed for so long is detrimental to how we can confront these NHI if they are evil or bad or detrimental for humanity. I know it's a tough one. I know it's a little paradoxical at times too, and contradictory too, but that's the state of things as they are right now, I think. Let me know what you think in the comments about these two clips from Lue and about not addressing the more positive aspect of learning to engage with the phenomenon or understand the phenomenon and ourselves too. Because whether we like it or not, we are part of the phenomenon. You heard that correctly. We are. So, if you like this or any other content you see on my channel, I already have 132 videos on it. You can go and check them all out, like them, comment, subscribe to the channel if you like it. Please do share in any platform you like. Just please tag me if you can, so people know about the channel. I know that the algorithm on YouTube really likes it when people share stuff outside of YouTube and share the link. So please, I implore you, do that if you like the content. If you want to support the channel or me in any other way, I'm going to leave a few links in the description so you can support the channel either through donations, or you can buy yourself something, or you can get something from the Amazon wish list, which is for the channel. But yeah, let me know what you think. And without further ado, I will see you guys tomorrow for a new video. Bye.